Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph, starting with Nun Ches Amud Beis at the new Mishnah. Our Mishnah continues to discuss the requirements of making measurements for the Techum. Says the Mishnah, Ein moidedin ella min hamumche, that in order to then measure, it's required to be done by a mumche, by an expert. Somebody who's an expert in terms of measuring, the technical aspects of measuring, as well as somebody who's an expert in the halachos of medida. There's another explanation, and that is ein moidin ella min hamumcha, refers to min hamumcha, the place that is yashar, that is straight. That means the shetach, the area that we're coming to measure, should be lichatchila, flat, and not be a mountain or a valley. However, b'di'evet, as we said in the previous Mishnah, if indeed one measures and comes across a mountain or a valley, then there are certain kulas, but lichatchila we try to avoid that. The Mishnah continues, riba lemokim echad umiet lemokim acher shoymin lemokim sheribe. If when measuring, he's measuring towards from the city out, the Techum, and what's required to be done is to measure twice. So he goes from one end to another end, and the idea would be that when he's complete, then he can go ahead and then make a line across the two of them. But over here it states that when the mumche was measuring, he made it a little bit longer on one side, whereas on the other side it fell a little bit shorter. Our Mishnah says we go lekula, and we say that we go based on the measurement that is longer. Va'afilu, the Mishnah goes on to say, riba le'echad umiet le'echad shoymim l'murba. Here, the simple reading of the Mishnah implies the same thing. If one is longer and the other one is shorter, then you go after the one that is longer. The Gemara will explain what is the chiddush in this case. The Mishnah goes on to say, "Va'afilu eved va'afilu shivcha." Even an eved and a shivcha who were bekabel mitzvahs, and they have mitzvahs like an isha, eved knaini and shivcha knainis, who are possible to give edus. Nonetheless, ne'emanin loymar ad kan techum Shabbos. They are believed to say until here is the techum Shabbos. Not that they're themselves saying that they are the ones who then made this techum, and certainly they're not even giving edus that they measured as such, because you need a mumche. What they're saying is, and what we're believing them to be saying, is that we saw the one who indeed did measure, the surveyor, he measured until here, until this point, or that people then walked until this point to identify the end of the techum. Because the Chachamim, they did not say their words to be machmir, rather to be mekil. We're on top of Nun Tes Amud Aleph, says the Gemara, L'makam sheriba in L'makam shemi'et loy. The Gemara is asking that you're saying when the person, the expert, is measuring, and he's measuring from the city outwards, and let's say he goes from the east side, and he also then goes from the west side all the way out. So when he's measuring, he gets to one that is longer than the other. One is longer and the other one is shorter. Ask the Gemara, that means the makom that's riba, there you can go ahead and use that tchum, but the one that's not. In other words, the lashon of the Mishnah was riba l'makom echad, miyet l'makom echad, shoymim l'makom sheriba. Is mashma only the makom that's riba? That side is going to be valid, but the one that's short on the other side not? That's included in the entire amount that was considered to be longer. Answers the Gemara, Eimo af l'makom sheriba. It means to say, even that which is longer, we're going to be mekil and allow that the whole area, not only the one that is shorter, but even when it goes lengthened to the longer, that itself is going to be used as the techum. The Gemara quotes the Mishnah, Riba le'echod u'mi'et le'echod. Ask the Gemara, Hasu lamali. Why do we need this further? Hainu hach. This is the same exact case as the case that the Mishnah had just mentioned. When you have a surveyor who's then measuring, and we said he's required to do twice, one on one end and one on the other end, leaving the city. And we mentioned that if he gets a little bit longer on one end, whereas a little bit shorter on the other end, so then we go after the longer end. That seems to be the same exact thing that the Mishnah is teaching us here. Answers the Gemara, Hachi Ka'amar. This is what the Mishnah means to say. It's a different case. Riba echad umiyet echad shoymim lezeh sheribe. We're talking about two different surveyors. One is measuring and he gets to a longer measurement, whereas the other one gets to a shorter measurement. Two different mumchim. Omar Baye explains, not only do we go after the one that was longer, again, lahakil, but Abaye says a certain Tanai, ubilvad shelo yarbe yoisem imidas ha'ir balachsoino. Providing that the difference between the longer and the shorter is not going to be the midah of alachsoino. We had learned it earlier on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Beis, Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis, that when it comes to making a diagonal from the middle of, let's say, the area of the city, when we make a diagonal, as we're squaring around the city, there we're talking about a circular city and making a square around it, we made a differentiation. We said to go to the corner and then versus going to the sides, we said that the corner, if you go diagonally, that would be 1.4 times the line going to the sides in the other directions. And therefore, he's pointing out over here, Abaye, that if the difference, if it's going to be a small difference, then we can explain it. But if it's going to be a difference that's going to be greater than this amount, then it's not going to be a valid then measurement. In other words, up until the measurement of 1.4 times this amount, in other words, if he says that he made a measurement of 2,000 and he went to the diagonal, so then if you divide 2,000 by 1.4, we would get 1,429 if we round it up. That is still going to be a valid type of measurement. The difference between 2,000 and 1,429. But if it's going to be greater than that, then we cannot say that he made a proper mistake. We'll say that it's something that's going to be not a valid type of measurement, and therefore we won't accept the measurements. Says the Gemara, bringing the next part of the Mishnah, the Chachamim, they only said their words to be mekil and not to be machmir. Ask the Gemara, the Brisa states the opposite, that the Chacham said their words to be machmir, not to be mekil. Says the Gemara, Amar Ravina, loy lahakil al divrei Torah, el lahachmir al divrei Torah. Not to be mekil on the words of the Torah, meaning no more than the words of the Torah, rather to be machmir than the words of the Torah. However, tchumin derabanan, but our subject of tchumim is derabanan, and therefore they were mekil in two respects. In the Mishnah states they were mekil when it comes to one long and one shorter measurement. We go after the longer one, which is a kula. We also saw that indeed over here in our Mishnah, if we have an eved or a shivcha, who then is going to state, even though they're pasol le'edus, but if they're going to state that we saw the surveyor going until this point, or people that were walking until this point, then they'll be believed also a kula in regards to Eruv. The Gemara now brings the next Mishnah. This next Mishnah is discussing when we have a city, and in that city we want to then make shitufei mevuos. We want to combine. In other words, we had learned previously the concept of a Erev Chatzeros, which combines the Chatzer with the Batim, whereby you can go ahead and walk between and carry between a Bayis and a Chatzer and vice versa. We also learned the concept of Shitufei Mivois, which is Chatzeros that join one Mavui, that can be then, they can go ahead and walk and carry from one Chatzer to the Mavui and from Mavui back to the Chatzer. So when you have a city that is a city that could then be enclosed with shitufui muvois, providing all the people that live in the city to then be able to carry from their areas within the city itself because of the proper walls and shitufui muvois that were made. The Chacham were yet concerned that if we allow in certain circumstances for shitufei muvois to permit the entire city to be enclosed so that people can go ahead and carry throughout the entire city, one may forget the entire concept of then carrying in the Rishus HaRabim. So therefore, in certain circumstances, they said it's usher, it's prohibited. That's the subject of our Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Ir shel yachid v'nasis shel rabim. If you have, however, a city of a yachid, an individual city, where there's never going to be areas that's considered to be a Rishus HaRabim. Those streets, those roads are never considered to be a Rishus HaRabim because it belongs to the Yachid. So therefore, the Yachid, in such a city, there's never concern that you would then forget the institution of carrying in Rishus HaRabim by allowing carrying in the Rishus HaYachid. So if it's a city that belongs to Yachid, let's say he was maskir, he rented out batim of the city, and that city belongs to him, it's a city shel Yachid, then there's never a concern that the Chacham would have that you cannot carry within that entire city. However, you might think that's a city shel Yachid that's nasi shel Rabim, that was, let's say, sold to the Rabim, but the Yachid still maintains a connection to that city. For example, he still collects taxes, or that he still owns, let's say, the roads, even though he sold the other parts of the city, including the houses. Nonetheless, even if it's considered to be a city of the Rabbim, here we say that the people will understand, they'll have a heker, that it was once belonging to the Yachid, and it has a connection to the Yachid, which enables them to go ahead and carry here in the city throughout the entire city, whereby they're not going to make a mistake and think you can go ahead and carry in a place that is not like that, like rather a Rishus HaRabim. So therefore, even though it was sold to the Rabbim, it was a city shel Yachid, Nashil shel Rabbim, Ma'arvin es kula, the Mishnah says, you can go ahead and make it shitufei mevuos, even for the entire city, and allow people to carry throughout the city. Again, the chiddush is that not only a Ir shel Yachid, but now it's a Ir shel Rabbim. But because it was a Ir shel Yachid, it has a heker that people will not make a mistake and then think you can go ahead and carry in another area, which is going to be the Rishus HaRabim. V'shel Rabim nasi shel Yachid. If it's the reverse, however, if it's first was belonging to the Rabbim and then it became the Yachid, say a Yachid bought the entire city from the Rabbim, so there we're going to be machmir. The Chacham were concerned. There, even though it truly belongs to the Yachid, and in truth there wouldn't be a concern at all to carry over here because there's no Rishus HaRabim. But because it had the shame of a Rabbim, people might make a mistake and think if you can carry in the entire city, then they'll think that it's because you can go ahead and carry even a makom that's going to be a makom of a Rabbim. So therefore, the Chacham said, Ein ma'arvin es kula. You cannot go ahead and make an Eruv throughout the entire city, enabling people to make shitufei mevuos to carry throughout the city, providing with the exception of Elim Ken Asa Chutza Lo Ki Ir Chadasha Shebi Yehuda Sheish B'Chamishim Diurin Divrei Yehuda, unless they separate a small area, a separate city that is outside, maybe even outside the Techum, that's going to be then made a separate shitufei mevuos for itself. Then we say that people will not make a mistake. Then they'll have a heker, and they'll see that it's not because of a possibility that you can go ahead and carry berabim, but rather they'll understand that over here is because they made shitufei mevuos, and therefore it's special over here. But in another place where they don't have the proper shitufei mevuos, and it's not going to be then something that's permissible to carry in, they won't make such a mistake. Rabbi Shimon Omer Gimel Chatzeiros Shel Shnei Batim. In other words, the Rabbi Yehuda had said that it's enough to have a small city that has chashivus, a city called Chadosha, that was in the area of Yehuda. That city had 50 people who lived there, which was a very small city. That was a minimum to have chashivus. Rabbi Shimon is even more mekil, and he says, so long as you have 3 chatzeros with 2 houses in each one, that's enough to be separated from the rest of the city. And therefore, if one then makes shitufim mivoros throughout the entire city, that is going to be also sufficient because you already had a separate area that is 3 chatzeros with 2 houses of each. That is not included. People then understand that the reason why you can carry over here is because of shitufim mivoros and not because you might make a mistake and think that you can carry in the Rishus Harabim. Ask the Gemara, Hechidami, Ir Shel Yachid v'Nasir Shel Rabim. What are we talking about? What's the case where you have an Ir Shel Yachid, that it belongs to an individual, and became an Ir Shel Rabim? What is that Ir Shel Yachid that we're talking about? Omer Rav Yehuda Kigon Diskarta de Reish Galusa, like the village of Reish Galusa, the town of Reish Galusa. Omar le Rav Nachman, my time. What's the reason why you're bringing this as an example, as if it's something unique to the Reish Galusa? If you're going to say it's because it's people are common to be around there because they need his shilton to get rishus for certain things, and then midkari adodi, they'll come to remind each other. And therefore, even though it was Yachi, but then it became the Rabbim, so therefore they'll remind each other, and they won't make a mistake that you can go ahead and carry in a regular place of Rishus HaRabim. Then Kula Yisrael, Nami B'tzafra D'Shabta Shchichi Gabi Hadoti. Asked Rav Nachman, then in a regular scenario, people on Shabbos morning are going to then be found one with the other. They're going to be gathering together. They're going to be there for drashos and other reasons. So therefore, they'll also remind each other. And therefore, they also then won't have this problem that you might come to make a mistake and think you can carry in a Rishus HaRabim. So why are you bringing an example of a town of the Reish Galusa? Elam Rav Nachman says, give her a more typical example. Kigon the Skarta de Natzui. It was a city of a private person called Natzui, and he sold it to the Rabbim. But since it still has the shame of Natzui, people understand that there's a heker over here, and they're not going to make a mistake thinking that you can go ahead and carry also in another makom that is just a Rishus HaRabim. So therefore they understand that it's connected to a Yachid, and therefore they can go ahead and carry the Chomim. We're not concerned about them carrying in this city.